there are some problems in Boston right now. The problem with Boston is that they've had injuries. They lost Gordon Hayward. And they've been struck with the COVID bug. They're 14-14 right now. They have a .500 record. They're 5th in the Eastern Conference. And they're 1.5 games in front of 9th place. So if they lose 2 games, they could very well be out of the playoffs as it stands. Let me talk about the injuries first. Marcus Smart is still out. He missed his 11th game when the Celtics lost to the Hawks. Kemba has missed 15 games this season. And he didn't play against Atlanta either. Boston has not found a way to replace Gordon Hayward yet. Gordon Hayward averaged 17.5 points last season with Boston. This year, Gordon Hayward is averaging 22.3 points per game with the Charlotte Hornets and is a borderline all-star. The Celtics did not replace Gordon Hayward this offseason, and I was mistaken because I'll tell you why I was mistaken. I thought Aaron Nesmith was going to come into the league ready to play. He's not ready to play. His three-point shot has not transferred yet. And in hindsight, Desmond Bane was the best shooter in the draft. And Boston did draft him, but I believe they traded him as well. Because originally, they drafted Pritchard, Nesmith, and Bane. Which on draft night, I was like, whoa. Their draft was amazing. But they ended up trading Desmond Bane to Memphis. And Desmond Bane is playing a huge role in what they're doing over there in Memphis. And now we're going to COVID. Jayson Tatum missed 5 games due to COVID. He actually had COVID. And since coming back, Brad Stevens has played Tatum more minutes after getting COVID than he played before he had COVID. And Tatum has openly talked about this, that he's had breathing problems and he's had shortness of breath during the games. So I just want something to make sense for me. I think Brad Stevens is a good coach. I don't think he'd be playing Jayson Tatum that many minutes if he didn't have to. The reason he has to is because there's nobody else that can play right now. Grant Williams and Semi Ojeleye have been starting. They're both offensive liabilities. They can defend, and I actually really like Grant Williams. To me, he projects like a better PJ Tucker. I like Grant Williams, but I also don't think they're starting players. Grant Williams, I think I can deal with, but not Semi Ojeleye. Jeff Teague, when he plays, has been a huge disappointment. Payton Pritchard has beat him out at this point. Payton Pritchard has beat Jeff Teague out to this point. And like I mentioned earlier, Aaron Nesmith was supposed to come into the league ready. He shot 50% from 3 at Vanderbilt. He's shooting 31% from 3 now. And when he plays, he just looks lost out there. He's a rookie, so we can't be too harsh on him. But this is just the state of the Celtics right now. Danny Ainge was asked if this team is good enough to compete, and Danny Ainge said no. And he also made a comment about how it's his fault that this roster isn't as good. And yeah, it is. Like, Danny Ainge, what are you doing? Every single year when a star player is about to get traded, the team that is always in the bubble of names that get mentioned are the Boston Celtics. But the Boston Celtics never pull the trigger on a superstar player. You look at Kawhi when he was getting traded from San Antonio. Boston was in the mix. They never pulled the trigger on a Kawhi trade. When Anthony Davis was on the trade market, they never got a chance to get Anthony Davis. And granted, I'll give Danny Ainge a pass for that because Anthony Davis said he didn't want to play in Boston. And James Harden, Miami, Philadelphia, and the Nets were all very aggressive in trying to pursue James Harden. Miami, not so much. You heard a little bit here and there. Philly, really aggressive. Daryl Morey wanted James Harden in Philadelphia. The Nets ended up getting him. Boston, They were a little bit, they were churmers, but they weren't really in the mix. You didn't hear that they made offers. So what are you doing? Get a star player. Try to get a superstar. And I know, like, getting a superstar is hard because you don't want to lose the trade. You don't want to give up too much, especially like that. I mean, people thought the Nets gave up too much, and the Nets gave up Jared Allen, Karis LeVert, and Taurean Prince, and Kurucs, and picks. And some people think they gave up too much. Imagine if the Celtics gave up Jaylen Brown for James Harden. Everybody would have went crazy because everybody would have thought that would have been way too much. In my opinion, I would have done it. Like, I love Jaylen Brown. I think he's a good player. I think he's a great player. But if it's for James Harden, you get James Harden. I think it's a no-brainer. I really do think it's a no-brainer. Right now, the Celtics have a $28.5 million trade exception, which is the biggest trade exception in NBA history, and no moves have been made. Are they going to get Blake Griffin? I hope not. I hope that's not Danny Ainge's big move out his sleeve. I hope that's not it. Are they going to get Andre Drummond? I'd actually like that a little bit more because they'd have a big man finally. But all in all, it seems like this Boston Celtics team, and hear me out, has had some bad karma since not giving Isaiah Thomas a contract and trading him to Cleveland for Kyrie Irving. I'm just saying, ever since they did Isaiah Thomas dirty, things have not been going the Celtics' way. Yes, they made the Eastern Conference Finals this past season, but you look at it, they traded Isaiah Thomas for Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving leaves, and I mean, it was a whole storyline about how toxic that locker room really was. And when you think about Isaiah Thomas, like, you look at Kemba right now. Isaiah Thomas, if he were never to play in that playoff game when he had a bad hip and re-aggravated it and kind of almost costing his career, pretty much, he probably would have been the same player that Kemba is right now. You went from Isaiah Thomas to Kyrie to Kemba. Kyrie was supposed to be the prize, but he ended up leaving. Now you got Kemba, who's very injury prone right now. I don't know. I'm just saying, in hindsight, those were the right moves to make. I understand that. But it just feels like a little bit of karma is at play here. Because, you know, let's be honest here. Isaiah Thomas, for a while, was the heart and soul of Boston. Boston was the lovable underdog. Everybody loved him because of Isaiah Thomas. He was the role model for that team. He was a leader. Everybody loved him. And I think that kind of messed up the chemistry for a little once he left. I don't know. For me, I just feel like a little bit of karma is at play right there.